some form of exposure to English language. Can they speak and read the language? Not necessary. But today, because many of our parents are very affluent, they would have sent their children to some kinds of kindergarten, and they may be speaking English at home, but the majority of Singaporeans today, just about 50%, continue not to use English as a home language. So that's the expectation when the children come to us. They probably have heard some form of English. It's more likely Singlish than English. We have our local version of English in Singapore. We lovingly call them Singlish. So among ourselves, often we will lapse into that informal version of English. It's some kind of a pidgin English. But most of our children would have heard some English words here and there before they come to school. So that's a kind of expectation, and that's a page from our present-day Singapore textbooks. This is chapter 2. So soon after they enter school, in primary 1, the textbooks will look somewhat like that. The language is not too difficult, and the Ministry of Education take care to make sure the publishers are introducing age-appropriate language at that point. And the teacher is likely to be reading the instruction to the students. In any case, no teacher will be opening the textbook at this point in the lesson, where the lesson is more an activity. But this is the kind of expectation in primary 1. A lot of the mathematics and science instruction, by the way, we do not begin science instruction until primary 3, until grade 3. So grade 1 and grade 2, we do not do science in schools. Science instruction only begin in primary 3. And by then, they have fairly competent language skills already. So for mathematics, it begins in grade 1, primary 1, and a lot of teachers will probably begin a lesson in a concrete way, as recommended by the textbooks. So for example, in this lesson, they are using cubes, somewhat like Lego cubes, Unifix cubes, in this case 4 cubes, and they break the cubes in different ways, and then there is this repetitive language structure. How many are there in each group? 3 and 1 make 4. So this repetitive structure, something and something make 4, 2 and 2 make 4, 1 and 3 make 4, 3 and 1 make 4, 4 and 0 make 4. Somewhat is used to help our students acquire the necessary language to communicate during the mathematics classes. By primary 4, students are found to be able to read simple word problems. So for example, our students in grade 4 or primary 4 are fairly capable of reading a word problem such as this. This is a test item from the Trends in Mathematics and Science Study teams. So about 80% of 4th graders in Singapore, they are able to get this right. I'm assuming that they are able to read this little passage. The other 20% who did not get it right, it could be a combination of either they cannot read it, or more likely, they can read it but cannot comprehend it, and then most likely, they can read and somewhat comprehend it, but did the mathematics wrong anyway. So I think this kind of gives us a confidence that by the time they are about 10 years old, they are capable of reading something to this point. A train left Redville at 8:45 a.m. It arrived in Bedford 2 hours and 18 minutes later. What time did it arrive in Bedford? So not a totally complex paragraph, but something that you would expect of a 10-year-old. Similarly, in a situation that's less familiar to them, in a soccer tournament, teams get either 3 points for a win, 1 point for a tie, 0 points for a loss. Zland has 11 points. What is the smallest number of games Zland could have played? So these are the items put out by the international body in assessing student achievement across more than 60 countries in grade 4 and grade 8. And these are just 2 items from the grade 4 test. And this kind of gives us some assurance that by primary 4, the students are capable of reading things like that. And by the end of primary schooling, by the end of grade 6, our students are expected to be able to handle language to a great extent. In particular, our state test, national test called the primary school leaving examination for the mathematics, it places a great emphasis on word problems. A lot of the items are word problems. Let me give you an example of such an item. This is taken from the most recent examination held at the end of 2012. A bakery and a library are 120 meters apart. They are located between Hong's house and Jaya's house, as shown below. The bakery is exactly halfway in between the two houses, and the diagram is given. One day, Hong and Jaya started cycling from their houses at the same time, and they arrived at the library together. Jaya cycled at 70 meters per minute, while Hong cycled at a speed of 15 meters per minute faster than Jaya. And then the questions follow. So our 6th graders, 11 plus 12-year-olds, they are expected to be able to handle language to a great extent. Not only are they expected to be able to do the mathematics related to it, in this case, rate and speed, they are also expected to be able to read, comprehend, manage the information which is somewhat complex, and then deal with the mathematics and computation related to it. I've just spent a couple of moments a while ago sharing with you the kind of language expectations in present-day Singapore education as far as the 1st graders, 4th graders, and 6th graders are concerned. Beyond that, our secondary students in grade 7, or what we call secondary 1, is not different from Matayom Neng. It's about the same, secondary 1, all through secondary 4, and then for those who continue to grades 11 and 12, the junior colleges, of course, they are expected to handle language appropriate to their age as benchmarked internationally. So our secondary students are expected to be able to handle language at the level that is expected of people who use language as their first language. I will not bother you with the mathematics, but for those of you who are teaching mathematics and interested in the solution, when you download the PowerPoint slides, you are able to see the solution to it. But for the purpose of this morning's discussion, it's probably not that important. I will now share with you a little bit about situations that we had in Singapore when we first started and elsewhere. The case for Singapore is a national case that I studied simply because I'm there all the time and working in it and doing research in it. As I mentioned to you, we started off in 1980 trying to do this thing to teach mathematics and science in English, at the same time to have a new approach in teaching mathematics. Some of the difficulties is to grapple with these two big changes. Teach mathematics in a fairly new way, and then teach mathematics in a language that is probably not our first language. And what are the things that we did at that point in time is to give our teachers a textbook that is fairly easy to manage. The language is not cluttered. It gave them some scaffolds in what they can say to the students. The repetitive structure that is embedded in the textbook to help the students learn those structures to articulate some of their thoughts. And in the pre-service teacher education, all the teachers are expected to attend a course that's called Use of English in Teaching, UET. Today, I think it has kind of evolved because most of our pre-service teachers are fairly competent in using English, so it has kind of shifted its focus to emphasize more on communication rather than just the mere use of English in teaching. But I recall that's a long time ago, when I was preparing to become a teacher, I had to attend a course that taught us how to pronounce words, how to make announcements in the morning, and such other functional use of the language. Later, I'm going to share with you some factors that kind of helped us in Singapore when we first embarked on this journey. But the case for Singapore is a national one where we implemented this whole thing across the 170 primary schools in the nation. In the Philippines, where I also do a fair bit of work, there are actually two different systems. That's actually me being the teacher to a group of students. I sometimes do lessons in the Philippines for the teachers to study. We call this lesson study. In the Philippines, there are actually two different systems. The private school system, which is just like the Singapore system, where English language is used on a daily basis. It is the medium of instruction, it is the language of work, everything in school functions in English. And then there is the public school system, where English is used a lot, but there are also hundreds of local languages and dialects that are being used in different parts of the country. So if you are in Metro Manila private school, then it's a bit like the case of Singapore, where everything functions in English. English is not the student's first language or the teacher's first language, but basically everything happens in the English language. If you're in Metro Manila and it's a public school, then the students are exposed to a lot of English. They may not speak English at home, but everything else happens in English as well. The proficiency of the teachers in the public schools is a little bit less than that in a private school, but once you go outside Metro Manila and you go to the provinces, that's when most people do not speak English at all. They would have spoken one of their local languages or dialects, and at the same time, they have to learn the national language called Filipino language, which is actually Tagalog. And then on top of that, they now have to learn English and have to learn to use English in the learning of mathematics and science. So the case of Philippines kind of help us understand how to help the teachers in the provinces in making sure the students are exposed to English more on a daily basis. And one of the learning points for us is that if the schools operate mostly in English, then even if the children do not normally speak English outside the classroom, then their ability in the language will be better. The case of Malaysia, the country that kicked Singapore out in 1965, they shifted to use English in mathematics and science some time ago. But in more recent years, for I suspect political reasons and nationalistic reasons, they have kind of revert back to what they started off more than a decade ago. So the case of Singapore is when a previous government felt that they need to do this to make their graduates competitive in the global economy, and in the more recent years, they revert back to using the national language, which is Bahasa Malaysia, Malay language, to teach mathematics and English. The case of Malaysia kind of give us caution about not to introduce too much politics into education. Otherwise, the outcomes of the students is in the hands of a bunch of politicians rather than educators. Incidentally, I am a Malaysian, just that I studied in Singapore all my life because my parents didn't have confidence in me using Malay to study mathematics and science when I was a child. Brunei is similar to Singapore, except that around the country, the use of English is somewhat less than in Singapore. Brunei is a case that kind of gives us insights into teaching mathematics and science in the local language, in this case, the Malay language, Bahasa Melayu, in the early grades. So perhaps the first 3 years using local language, and then afterwards begin to inject the use of English, and by the time they're in secondary school, they will use English to study mathematics and science. So if we are interested to look at how that will impact on a student's learning, then Brunei have some learning points for us. I will now share with you smaller cases of schools that I know. So the previous cases are the ones that I kind of study as a system, the kind of things that happen within the system that impact on students' learning. And then I also study smaller cases of schools and school districts in the region. The case of Indonesia. We found that in the case of Indonesia, most people will not speak English. However, if the school run an English program and all the teachers speak English all the time with the children, and that the children will be able to handle the language quite well. So this is a particular case of Bina Bangsa School. The school is run by local people, and then they get help from some Singaporean teachers as well as a lot of Filipino teachers, and they have decided from day one that they are going to use English in the daily operation as well as, of course, the medium of instruction. And the children there speak English perfectly fine. Although the moment they step out of school, they will no longer use English at all. So it seems like it is adequate if the school environment is English speaking, even if they do not use English at all at home and in public spaces. It seems like it's good enough that the children can discuss and can articulate their thoughts in English, and quite rarely do they revert to Bahasa Indonesia, which is the common language for the students. Indonesia is quite an unusual situation because no matter what racial group you are very fluent in the national language. So even the Chinese students, they may not be fluent in the Chinese language, but they can speak Bahasa Indonesia very well. It's almost like their mother tongue at the present time. And similarly, I work with a few schools in Thailand, and these are some schools that run English programs and all that. And I think you probably know this situation better than I do because you are here. And schools such as Anglo-Singapore International School, they have quite a lot of local students, Thai students. And the data that was collected by the school indicated that most of the Thai students rarely speak English at home, but that did not seem to affect their performance in school at all, in particular the use of English language. It is quite interesting that their debate team comprises of a few local students. But it seems to be important that these children begin to use English right from the start, the moment they enter kindergarten or primary one. They found that students who come in halfway through, like those who join the school in the upper primary grades, primary 5 onwards, they seem to be the ones struggling, having used Thai for a long time. And even though they are really brilliant students, they are very capable students, it seems that it impacted on their subsequent learning when they switched to the use of English to learn everything else. And now just a couple of examples from elsewhere. I work with some schools in England, and these are schools where the children are recent immigrants. They are children of recent immigrants. So most of them do not speak English at home, and many of them are learning to speak the language. And it seems again that because in England everything operates in English and the learning is in English, it seems like by the time the students finish primary school, they are fairly competent in the language, and despite their home background, they did not perform as well as students from more affluent background, but their performance is fairly competent in mathematics and science. So these are a bunch of schools under this academy. These are schools that used to be failing schools, and when they become some academy or the other, there's a new administration that comes in, and in this case, they kind of try to look at ways to help children who do not normally speak English at home to kind of cope in a situation where everything is in English. Chile, they use Spanish everywhere, So if you cannot speak Spanish, you kind of feel a bit lost when you're in Chile. And very often we go there because we work with the schools in the public schools in mathematics teaching. Chile is trying to do what we embarked upon in 1980, which is to use the fairly new approach in teaching mathematics. Of course, most of the time they use Spanish, but we also saw that there are a few schools that use English as a medium of instruction. And again, the same message we got from these case studies, and that is, even though the environment outside school is Spanish speaking, even though at home they speak mostly Spanish, and if it's not Spanish, it's not English. If the school provide an English-speaking environment, it seems like it did not impact on the students' ability to use the language in learning mathematics and science, or for that matter, other subjects. So there are a handful of schools in Chile that use English as a medium of instruction. Their teachers are all Chileans, but they use English on a daily basis with the children. I've also done some research in the Netherlands, and again, in Netherlands, everything is Dutch. People speak Dutch outside school, and although most Dutch people, they can speak English very well, you will not hear English on a daily basis. And we saw two things. We saw that in some instances, especially in the rural areas, although the children are not totally comfortable using the language, they can understand it well enough. So we have seen many examples where the teacher instruct in English and the children responded in Dutch. And they go on like that perfectly well. The more able students or students in the urban areas, so the school on the left is in Utrecht. Utrecht is fairly international. So even though this is just a regular public school and the students are average students, they can operate in English perfectly well. The photograph on the right is in a rural area where most students are not comfortable using English, but for the children in the so-called gifted classes, meaning these are the more able students, they can operate not just in English, but in several other European languages. I'm going to go on to some things that we learn from our experience in using English in the learning of mathematics and science. But before that, I would like to pause a little while for a bit of discussion and questions. Some of you recognize this because it's in Thailand, right? Well, we also do some work with public schools in the rural parts of Buriram, in Lampai Mat. But before that, questions or points of discussion? How many hours of English language instruction?
Oh, there it is.
Yeah.
Does it vary from early education to secondary school, or is it the same throughout?
As far as instruction in English language is concerned, it is 1 hour a day, and the younger students get slightly more. The older students in secondary school get 4 hours a week. So it's about the same. So 5 hours a week, 4 hours a week. But everything else is in English. They study social studies in English, science in English, everything is in English, public announcements, everything is in English, except when they have their home language lessons.
Is there any bilingual lessons?
No, there's no bilingual lesson at all. So it's either in English or it's in the home language. So, for example, I'm Chinese, and then there are some Chinese students, or I can understand Malay, and I will not be speaking Chinese to a Chinese student, even outside class, during recess time. So, two Chinese people speaking English to each other. Among children, sometimes they'll chatter in their home languages. So sometimes I hear like a group of Malay boys talking among themselves, and they're like talking with me, but when I respond, it's still in English. So that's how we operate.
Sorry, one more. Do students who struggle in the language get other support systems throughout the school?
Yes. Students who struggle with the language get support, especially at the starting point. At the starting point in primary one, the gap between those who can and those who cannot is so wide. Today, the problem is very small. Probably 5 to 10% of a group of 400 children that come into a school in primary one will have close to nothing as far as English language is concerned. So these children will just be lost totally in a classroom. They will not even understand basic instruction given by the teacher or not very well at all, right? So when they enter school in primary one, the children are tested. We have this thing that's called school readiness test, and they are put into 4 levels. Level 4 means they are just not ready, and usually we have 5 to 10% of children in that. And these children, they are pulled out during English language and mathematics. They remain in class for all other subjects like art or music or social studies or health education, but during English language and mathematics, they leave the classroom and they study with a teacher in a small group situation. So 10 children per group. Our regular class size is 30 for primary one, but these children get more attention. So that's the kind of support that they get, and this is implemented across all schools. Beyond primary one, it is up to the school to handle instances where students continue to struggle. Usually, you do not find a primary 2 student who do not understand English in a Singapore system, but you might in primary 1. So they have some support in primary 1, but beyond primary 2, there is nothing special. But many schools conduct what we call remedial classes anyway, but that's really up to the school and up to the individual teachers. So nothing that is at the national level, but more like at the local school and classroom level. Immigrant students.
Sorry, immigrant students at a higher level would get that same
That's
support.
Right.
Thank you.
Welcome. Something else? Either a point or a question? Yes.
Hi, I'm Randy. You mentioned using a different approach when teaching math. I think you called it concrete, practical, abstract, and I think used inquiry in association with that. Is that also used in teaching science?
So for science, we use this inquiry-based approach. Yes. So the answer is yes. In mathematics, we call that problem-solving approach, the concrete, pictorial, abstract approach. In fact, the whole education system focuses on the same thing, which is thinking and problem-solving. So the simple answer is yes. For science, I think it is called the inquiry-based approach, and in mathematics, it's called problem-solving approach. But fundamentally, they are the same thing.
And did you make the change to using English and this new approach because you thought they were compatible, they would support each other, or was there another reason for it?
The reason for that is not so much that they are compatible with each other, but those were the 2 decisions made for economic reasons, because we feel that our students need to be competent in the language, English language, and at the same time, they must learn mathematics in a way that the average learners can perform at a high level. So they were not selected because they were compatible with each other, but they were selected because our students kind of need them, and they were implemented at the same time because those were the results of a big reform called the Go King Sui's reform. It was led by one of our senior ministers back then. So those were some of the key recommendations, to use English and to change the way we teach mathematics.
Can I have one? Yep.
Yes, sure.
What is the first, when you implement all the stuff in, I think, in 1980, right? What is the major problem you guys got during that time?
I think the major problem is nobody knew what was happening.
Right.
That was a major problem. Just like probably all ministries of educations around the world, while they may be excellent in planning and researching, they are less competent in transmitting the message across. So the difficulty was mostly in getting the message across to, and we don't have a big system. Ours is just 170 schools. And even then it took us a while. I think something between 3 to 5 years to begin to see any semblance of order. So we do not get any good results in the first 5 years of implementation, but fortunately for us, our government they are kind of stubborn, so they said, it didn't go on well, it's probably because of us not doing it well, but nothing wrong with the approach and the focus.
Yeah, anyway, you get a good result to improve the next round of the curriculum.
Yes, I think each time we implement it, we go down to the schools and find out what are the issues and all that. So yes, I think the researchers and the Ministry of Education people